Have you heard about modern charts in Microsoft Access? Well, I'll give you a short demo and I'll tell you what I think about them. Hi, I'm Philip from codekabinett.com. And before I'm going to talk about modern charts in Access, I've got a quick question for you. I recently recorded a couple of very long videos on indexing Access tables, on aggregate functions, and I wonder, were these videos too long? So I'm going to put up a poll up there, and please do me a favor, just click yes or click no, whatever you think. Please be honest. Matters much to me to see what kind of content is right for you. Well, modern charts in Microsoft Access. Well, charts are obviously a form to visually display data, and with all the heaps of data that are becoming available everywhere, that are recorded everywhere, that are processed everywhere, some sort of graphical representation of data to get to the meaning of the data is very, very useful. So charts in general should be a no-brainer. They are a very valid tool for data visualization, and so they are also a very valuable tool in Microsoft Access. But what about the modern in modern charts? Before we look at the modern charts, maybe a short recap about the classic charts in Microsoft Access, because it's not that this is something entirely new. There was the Microsoft Graph chart control available in Office 97. That's more than 20 years ago. That version of Office already came with a chart control. Back then it was an ActiveX control that you could put inside your Access forms, and it was included with Office, but it was completely separate from the individual applications. And if I remember correctly, back then this chart control was meant to be used in any Office application, including Microsoft Excel or Word, not limited to Microsoft Access. Over the time, this has evolved, it was maintained, but nevertheless it was not fully redesigned, it was never put really up to the most modern standard, and Microsoft Excel kind of segregated from that and developed its own charting solutions. And the, well, very classic, very dated looking charting solution became integrated in Microsoft Access because it was pretty easy to do so, I guess. And well, since Access 2010, this control has become a native Access control, which is not entirely correct, because it was still an ActiveX control that was living outside of Access and was still depending on the Microsoft Graph application or control installed, and you could only use it right from the Access toolbox and drag that onto your form. That was was an advancement because it was right integrated there, but still it was an external control. And the two problems with that control, the classic charts, that were the dated look and feel. It was, you could see it was developed long time ago, and it was not really modernized regarding its user interface layout, regarding its presentation, and that is a bit of a problem for charts. And equally problematic was its user interface for developers. And I haven't looked at that for years, but I did so for this video, obviously, and it has a bit of a steep learning curve to get into it, to understand how it works, where all the settings and properties are there. Some of them are very, very hidden and you have to dig around quite a bit to find everything you need. Okay, enough being said, I'll show you the classic charts on screen. I used the sample database I used recently for my aggregate function demo, and that might be worth a look because as a basis for a chart you will most of the time use some sort of aggregated data. So here's a base query that does calculate the order value of orders, and there are two important columns, the order date and the order value. Now I create a new query based on that real quick. I add the order value query here and just drag down the order date and the order value. And to aggregate that per month, because that's what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how to chart the monthly turnover of a business. So I use the year function to extract the year from the order date, and then I concatenate that with the month from the order date. So, and I name this year month. So quick query. So it basically works. There's a little problem here because the single digit months are displayed as such. We're going to fix this because that would mess up ordering. I used the format function to fix this, and we run this again. That looks much better. And now we just simply save this as query order value per month. Okay, little preparation done. I quickly create a form in design view and go to the design tab over here, and I'm not using this chart, that is the modern chart, but for comparison now the old classic chart, and I drag that on the screen here. And it comes with a chart wizard, and that is actually quite helpful. So I switch to queries, go to my order value per month. I add both columns in there, and I think the best chart to display that would be probably a line chart. So this is a preview how the chart will be laid out. That is fine with me. We do not need a legend, and we just finish. So I can drag that a little bit bigger, and this is just a dummy chart that will be inserted by default. That is not how it's going to look. We quickly switch to the form view, and now you already see it's a fairly meaningful data in here. You see the year and month on the horizontal axis and the turnover on the vertical axis. And there are a few minor details. That is actually money. We can change that by going back to design view and say chart object edit. And now I can say, yeah, that is a currency, and maybe we use a little bit different chart style and area chart. That is quite nice. When we're done, we can hit the upper left corner of the form and it will revert back to the classic axis design view. And here we are with, well, a basic workable chart. It's not looking modern, it's a bit dated, but it does work. And yeah, you can do quite a bit of charting with this control. So it's not at all bad. The problem you see here, it is pretty complicated. You can select stuff here and have that drop down to change stuff, and if you double click there will be a dialog to format the plot area. If you click somewhere else you get a dialog for the formatting of the chart area, and I think, well, most of the stuff is there, or basically all of it, but it's not particularly user-friendly. These were the classic charts in Microsoft Access. What about modern charts? Microsoft announced earlier this year, actually a little before the Access DevCon developer conference, announced a more modern chart control for Microsoft Access. And that was announced to be integrated into the retail version of Access 2019 and to become available in the current version of Access 26 if you are on an Office 365 subscription. And actually it has become available in the most recent update on the monthly channel of the Office 365 subscription. That is version 1806. And maybe you have seen a couple of screenshots. Microsoft promoted that at Access DevCon with a dedicated video recorded for that conference, and they put a lot of effort in to create a more modern looking chart that is very similar in its appearance to the charts in Microsoft Excel. Okay, let's look at it on screen. For comparison, we are going to create the very same chart again, but this time using the modern charts in Access. We can reuse our order value per month query as data source, so we go straight to create form design, and now I go to the insert chart button in the ribbon here. And when we look through the available options for chart types, you might notice there are not too many available. Actually, the area chart we used with the classic charts is not available here. So for a better alternative, we have to resort to the line chart. I draw this on my form and you instantly see this behaves differently. I minimize the navigation pane so you see more. Now the chart looks more modern, more fresh. That is a good thing. And on the right hand side there is a new dialog for property settings called chart settings. You can show and hide that using this button in the ribbon here labeled chart settings. And these are the most important settings for the chart, but all of them are also available right here in the property sheet, the conventional Access property sheet. For now, I'm going to hide the property sheet and focus on the new chart setting dialog that allows you to configure the most important properties of that chart. So we go to queries, select our order value per month query, and you instantly see there is a usable chart in here automatically. And now we could say, yeah, we want to be explicit and say the Access category is year month and the values are the order value. That does not make much of a difference for now. And then we can switch over to the format settings of that chart. We could say, yeah, we rather want to have a green line here for our values, and we want squares to mark the individual points, and we could add a trend line like a moving average or a linear trend line here, whatever suits your chart best. So, but there's one thing that I think is pretty annoying, and that is the undo functionality in that chart. I changed quite a lot of stuff in here, and now I go to the undo button here and hit it once. And the whole chart is gone. So all the settings I configured in that chart setting tool, that is erased. And that is something you should take care of, that it doesn't just undo the very last configuration change in there, but all you did in there. I can redo it, and then some of my settings reappear, but you notice the trend line is missing, the color is wrong, so it did only restore my data source settings, but not the changed format that I configured here. Well, okay, that is one little annoyance. We can probably live with that. But I show you something else that is much more annoying, at least to me. You see, we have values that are a currency. And I can select a format for the primary values axis. So I would say, yeah, it is a currency. But then in my regional settings, or with my regional settings, a problem arises. The chart control misinterprets my decimal separator, which is the comma, to be the thousands separator, and that is incorrect. So the numbers displayed here are wrong. For the numbers I currently have in my database, I could fix that by defining a manual format string that would fix it now. But if I want to explicitly set a decimal separator here, then I got a bit of a problem. So if I write it that way, it does not properly work, because the dot here was not intended as a decimal separator, but as a thousand separator. So that is wrong. And that is something for which I haven't found a workaround yet. If you are in the United States or use US number formats, that's probably not going to affect you. But if you are in Europe or in another country where you've got different settings for the decimal point and the thousand separator, then this can be quite annoying, I think. Let's look at a slightly more complicated chart now. I created a new query. It's order value per month and customer, and that's very similar to what we used before. I just added the customer in here and added the country of the customer as an additional group by column in here. So I go straight to create a new form, and once again I'm going to insert a chart, and I think for what I'm going to show now, a stacked column chart would be most appropriate. So I insert this here and once again hide the navigation pane so that you can see a little bit better. The property sheet as well for now. I select my new query, order value month and country. Once again, the category axis is year month, and the values are sum of order value. But now we're going to add a series in here, and that is the country. So with a few clicks we created a pretty appealing, nice chart that displays our turnover per customer country. Very easy. And of course we could go to the format settings, and now you notice the data series. These are all the countries in there, and if I say I would rather see Germany as being displayed in this maroon type of color, then you can simply change that. And there's one thing that I find a bit lacking, because now I can select all these series and add a trend line, but this is a trend line. Let's just add a linear trend line. This trend line is only applied to Germany. Of course, I could now go to the United States and add a trend line as well. Then I would have two trend lines, but as far as I can see, it's not possible to create a trend line for the total values. That is something that I'm seriously missing with this type of form. And I switch to the form view, and you see there's another problem here. The month-year combination here is still displayed horizontally, but the space is lacking to display that completely. So the most important part, the month, is cut off and replaced by 3 dots. That's pretty much annoying, because I have not found any option to change the axis labels down here to vertical settings. They will change eventually if I go back to design view and decrease the size of the chart some more. Well, I'm not sure. They sometimes, now you see, now they switch to vertical display. If I drag that a bit down, now they are displayed vertically. But that is some sort of automatism happening somewhere in the background. I've not found any property to manually adjust these settings. There's one thing I would like to remark upon. That is the data source for the chart. Now, if we go to the property sheet, you see the row source in here is actually the query I selected. And there is another property, the transformed row source. And I'm going to zoom this, and you see this has been auto-created by the chart control after I selected the query and my axis categories and the type of values. And this is actually a cross-tab query that has been automatically created for me. That is basically the same approach the classical chart control was using, but with the classical chart I would have had to write this cross-tab query myself. Now it's basically auto-created by the chart, and this is a read-only property. I cannot enter any data in here. I can enter it, but once I try to leave it and update the property, it says I can't assign a value to this object, so I have to undo this data entry. The only way to change this, and I'm going to show that, look at the sum over here, is by going to the chart settings and change this value here. It's now in brackets sum, that is the aggregation that is used, to something else. And let me, excuse me, I need to make this window a little bit smaller and scroll down here just for the sake of you seeing this. Now I can change between the aggregate functions and switch that to none. That is not possible in this type of chart, but I can switch to minimum, and then you see this query is automatically changed in there. There's one more thing I would like to show you, and that is something that is not possible with the classic chart control in Access. To show that, I created a new query. It's once again an aggregate query based on our original order value per month query. I just added the customer ID here as another group by level. We created that query and once again create a new form, and I just add the table customer in here and add the customer name and customer ID as fields up here, and then once again I add a line chart here. And I use my newly created order value per month and customer query down here. Now, once again, this access category was year month, and that is the sum of order value. Don't need the field list anymore, but I need the property sheet. So, and now you see there is an option to add link child and master fields in here. And I'm going to link my chart to the form via the customer ID. Can close the chart settings already, make this a little bit smaller. And one important thing, I change the layout of my form, the default view, to a continuous form. And now with the old charts, I would have encountered an error now. It would have told me it's not possible to display a chart in a continuous form. But I've got no error here, and if I switch to the form view, you see there is actually a chart displayed here, and you see it's different for each customer. This customer had only one order, so the chart's pretty meaningless, but you see this is the order value for the customer that is displayed. We have seen the old Access Classic charts now, and now in comparison also the new modern charts, and well, obviously they look much better, the modern charts. There's no denying that. They have a modern design, a modern layout, they look appealing, and you see that in an instant. That is important. So yes, that is definitely a huge plus for them. And they are very easy to use. If you try to design a chart first time, maybe you need to fiddle a little bit around to get the chart access and series stuff and that adjusted. But after very short time, you will be able to create a simple diagram in or with the modern chart control, and that is a huge bonus as well if we think about Microsoft Access being directed to novice developers that do not have huge levels of experience with complex charting solutions. And all the settings that you can set via the user interface, not only these chart settings, but all the properties in the Microsoft property sheet, they are accessible via VBA as well. That is essential for us developers. And the bit of using charts in continuous forms, well, that is certainly nice. I'm not so sure about its relevance in practice. It is much more important to have that possibility in reports. And that was there already before with the old classic charting control. You could use that in reports as well. Now you can use the modern controls in continuous forms. That is certainly nice, but not that big of a deal, at least not for me. And one final little bit of advantage, you do not have any external dependencies anymore. The charts are built, they are baked right into Access. That is very, very nice, but only of minor importance because the graph solution usually was available with Microsoft Office. But let's look at the limited set of chart types. That is a little bit disappointing because at Access DevCon, when Microsoft announced the modern charts, they said you will be able to do everything that you could do with the classic charts with the modern charts as well. And if I look at the chart types, that is certainly not the case. And another thing you will certainly notice when working with that is what I pointed out during my demonstration. There are a couple of formatting options missing, like the text orientation, setting the labels to vertical orientation. That is something that I find quite annoying, actually. Well, then some bugs. I don't think that is too problematic. I hope they will be fixed very, very soon. With the Office 365 subscription, Microsoft rolls out an update every month, and I hope it will not take too long before these bugs are fixed with the number formatting in non-US regional settings. Well, there's one thing that I personally think is a big problem. I was not addressing that in the demo. You have only the row source. You can only put a SQL string in there, and that will be executed in the context of the local Access database. What I frequently do is work with SQL Server databases, and I quite frequently do not have a SQL string at all, but I call a stored procedure on the SQL Server, and that is returning my records for a form, for a report, for whatever. And that requires the Access object, like the form or a list box or a drop-down, whatever, be able to be bound to a record set. And that is something that is missing with the chart control. That affects me quite a lot. Most other developers probably not so much. But there is one thing that will affect quite a lot of people, and that is a game stopper, a showstopper right now. This modern chart control is not available in the Access runtime yet. Well, I hope when Access 2019 becomes available that there will be obviously a new runtime version for Access 2019, and that will naturally include the modern charts. That is pretty obvious, and so I'm not too worried about that, but you need to keep that in mind if you think about using the modern charts right now and rolling them out in an application to users that do not have the full version of Access but use the Access runtime. That will not be possible at all at the moment. Well, okay. In total, I think the pros and cons, they are fairly balanced at the moment. So, yeah, I'm rather neutral to the modern charts. I think I would definitely use them, but I'm not too excited about them. And I'm not so sure if Microsoft spent their effort in improving Access really at the right time. There were the classic charts, they looked a bit dated. Maybe, who am I to know that? Maybe it would have been possible to kind of polish the old charts, that they look a little bit nicer, to improve the designer UI a little bit, to make them more easy to use with a fraction of the effort that I believe has gone into the modern charts, and then use that amount of effort on something that is, at least to me, much more important, like improved SQL Server integration or other parts of Access that should be improved and modernized as well, like, for example, the VBA environment. But that is not really part or job of the Access team. That is an entirely different team at Microsoft. So we cannot blame the Microsoft Access team for not putting work into the VBA environment. That's simply not in their scope at all. Okay, let's wrap up modern charts. What else can I say? It is definitely, regardless if you think this is a good feature, regardless if you want to use them, it is definitely a huge benefit to see that Microsoft and the Access team are working on new features for the desktop edition. So this is not going to go away very soon if they put in serious effort to work on new features. And that is the huge takeaway for me that I perceive as very positive. They're working to improve Microsoft Access, and I say thank you Microsoft, thank you Access team for doing that, because that is very important to all the Access users, all the Access developers around the world. Okay, to you, thank you for watching. That's it for today. Bye bye.